One to the Co-Creators Convergence celebration of World Unity Week. I'm Noelle Marshall, and you right now are located in the Co-Creators Global Village. And what that means is there's about 4 different organizations that went together. We created our own little village inside of World Unity Week, and we brought the best of the best to share. And it's really worked very well this week. And so, by the way, my name is Noelle Marshall, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Co-Creators Convergence. And I consider Kathy Mason, my dear friend, also a co-founder of the Co-Creators Convergence, because she has been such a supporter for many, many years. And she always brings us fabulous guests. And I always get to learn something new, and it's wonderful. One of those people is Kelvin Chin. So without any further ado, I'm going to fade away here and pass the talking stick to you, Kathy, and Calvin, have a great chat.
Great. Thank you, Noah.
So Calvin, thank you so much for giving again of your soul. You are such a generous, amazing guide through all these different aspects of life. For those of you that don't know Kelvin, Kelvin is actually has 3 nonprofits that help people in so many ways. And he's an expert on not only afterlife with near-death experiencers, but also helping people through the trauma of losing children and more. So today we're going to talk about, I want to add, and he's my meditation teacher that I didn't even know I needed. I thought I knew how to meditate, but I didn't. Kelvin started learning how to meditate at 19 with the Maharaji, learning TM, and actually traveled the world teaching for Maharaji. And his version that he teaches now of meditation is extremely powerful, but very easy to learn. So Kelvin, tonight we're going to talk about a kind of serious subject, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how would you like to explain a little bit more about yourself for those people that don't know about you?
Sure. So I think I would describe myself as, in addition to, as Kathy said, I'm a meditation teacher, and I help people with afterlife issues and people with grief and so forth, regardless of how young or old their loved one, their loss may be, or other losses too, could be financial losses or other kinds of losses as well. But I would describe myself as a thinker. I'm a philosopher on a practical level, somebody who thinks a lot about stuff, and we're going to talk about love in this session together today. So I think about things a lot, and I think about them through the lens of consistency. Is the thinking, in other words, about whatever the topic is the thinking consistent? And is it practical? Does it help us in our daily lives now? It's interesting to talk about theories and so forth, and you know, I can talk about theories, but I tend to gravitate more towards the pragmatic and clarifying, which what we're going to do, I hope tonight together, clarifying some concepts that I think can lead to suffering when they're not clear. So I'm also the happiness or the contentment guy, you know, anti-anxiety, you know, reducing fear, increasing happiness and contentment in life, right?
What I love about the way I love learning from you, because I don't know if it's from you having a law degree and going through that training, or if you were always like this, but you make things practical and clear. So there isn't a lot of ego in it. There's just a easygoing factual presentation that people can access. And so much of the jargon, even today, people talking about quantum physics on our our stream, and you're like, you get caught on one statement and you've missed the whole rest of it. You don't do that. You simplify it. And you also, in a lot of ways, you make it experiential.
Yes.
And that is a fabulous teaching capability that you have that not very many people have.
Yeah, I always try to make it relatable, because these ideas can be talked about at this high level, but let's bring them down to our day-to-day level where we live life. And to the simplicity issue that you mentioned, I've always thought for thousands of years, as I've been teaching for many, many years, not just 50 years this lifetime, but you know, if you really understand something, you should be able to explain it in basic subject, verb, object language. You should be able to explain it clearly to people. When you start hearing people kind of go off and jargony and this and that, there's a lot, they may understand it and they may just not be explaining it clearly, but you cannot decide for yourself if they really do clearly understand it, because you get lost.
Well,
And,
it's
you know,
like they're not trying to connect you with their hologram.
yeah,
Because we all have our own perspective and our own experience.
sure.
And what you do is somehow the way that you put things into a sequence of order, it allows someone else to take those steps and go there with you and experience it, rather than the and it isn't just jargon, it's just that you don't know what they mean. That
Yeah.
a word like paradigm or like or quantum or whatever, a lot of those words, they're now thrown around, like love, like what we're going to talk about today.
Exactly
Right?
what we're going to talk about today. These concepts, I think, are, of course, universal, but how we understand them is very individual. And the issue then becomes, what is our interpretation of these commonly held concepts? And to me, the more clearly we can understand them in simple form, the better we can actualize, meaning execute on them in our daily life. Because it's easy to talk about love, but how do you do that with somebody who's hurtful? And how do you manage that? I mean, those kinds of more nuanced areas that, to me, happen in everybody's daily life, tend to get washed over and kind of whitewashed, and like, well, everybody should just love everybody. Okay, I get it. You know, I understand the Beatles song. I understand the, you know, the intent behind many of these Save the World concerts, and they're well-intentioned. I'm not throwing water on them, but okay, then what? After you've had the concert, what happens when everybody goes home? You know, that's the level I want to talk about, you know?
Well, the other thing is that I'd like people to understand about the value of working with you is that there is an aspect of self-love that you present without even calling it that, but that is the essence of what you're doing, that is a skill. And you actually teach people, you don't tell them exactly, but that's what you're doing. And once that's the only way you can give love, is if you've given it to yourself first.
Exactly.
So that's the other aspect that I just want to compliment you, because when someone's really hurting or they're going through a huge transition, a huge amount of chaos, especially if it's unexpected, they need that self-love awareness in order to get back to restructure their lives.
Yeah. And I've found through my own personal journey and you know, my memories go back 6,000 years, different lifetimes and so forth, but that over in this journey that I'm aware of, that's probably gone back millions of years, but I'm aware of about 6,000 of them, years, that where that happens, that you're talking about, that the kind of to me, it's the intersection between two different things. It's understanding and it's experiential. It's experiential, meaning, can I get a better, a deeper, or more, a broader, when I say better, a broader, more comprehensive view and experience of myself through meditation, for example, expanding my conscious capacity for experience the vastness of my own mind, and then thereby have an easier time experiencing the vastness of the universe and other people and so forth. That's experiential, but also understanding, meaning clarifying the nuances of my own understanding. And then I try to impart that to my students to help them clarify in their own way, in their own minds, whatever tidbits they may take from me in my classes to help them understand better. So to me, it's the intersection between experience through one's own expansion of one's own consciousness experientially, but also understanding from a rational standpoint, does this make sense? Does this interpretation make sense? Is it consistent with some of my other interpretations? And so I've spent lifetimes thinking about this, and especially this lifetime kind of pulling it together. And that's what this book is about, as you know.
I see you holding it, and so I'd like to show it.
Yeah.
This is one. Kelvin has two books, and I couldn't find the other one, but it's here somewhere.
Oh, here's the other one.
Okay, thank you. Overcoming
the other one, Overcoming the Fear of Death. But
yes.
the purple one, we're going to be talking about some of the 67 essays. We're not going to talk about 67 essays, but we'll talk about a few of them. The essays, the ideas, the concepts in these 60. It's a collection of 67 essays I've written about love and about living life and life principles and meditation and spiritual concepts. But tonight, we're going to be talking about, obviously, love and suffering, and how we can reduce suffering and increase our contentment in life through clarification of our thinking about these ideas. So yeah, it's a journey for me, and it continues to be a journey for me. And the last thing I would like to say about this, Kathy, is just that underscoring what you said. I'll reframe something that you said, which is, I'm here to help people by sharing my ideas and interpretations of these ideas and the application of these in practical way in daily life, to whatever extent they may be helpful for anybody who's listening to this. I'm not here to persuade people that my way is the way. I'm not here to persuade people that this is the only way to think about these concepts. I'm posing and I'm offering another way of looking at these ideas that may be helpful for people, because maybe they haven't thought about it this way. And if it fits, great. If parts of it don't fit, I always tell my students, you shelve it, you put it on a shelf, and you let it sit there. And maybe you never take it off, or maybe you take it off 6 months or 2 years from now. You go, Kelvin Chin said something about that 6 months ago or 2 years ago. Oh, that's what he meant. And so you take it off the shelf. But I'm here to teach people to think more on their own. That's my underlying goal.
Perfect.
There you go.
Well, let me know when, because I want to put you full screen when you're ready to go. I just wanted to chat for a few, because
sure, and then
I wanted to make sure the people that are watching this on Facebook and other sites get a chance to really see a master, someone I consider a master, who definitely can guide you through the tough parts. I mean, we're in huge chaos right now, and there's lots of people that are needing this kind of assistance that Kelvin offers.
Yeah, great. So I'll start, and then you can interject and jump in and
okay,
whatever. You know how we've worked in the past,
yes.
Kathy. It's conversational. So feel free, if you feel need for me to say more about a topic, or you bring in a subtopic or whatever.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about love. The title of the talk tonight is, and it's again a discussion with you all. It's love and suffering is the way I titled it. I didn't want to just call it love, because suffering is a big part of many people's lives. I've had experiences of suffering in difficult times in this lifetime and many of my other lifetimes and so forth. It's not something that anybody, I think, can avoid. And so what I wanted to share with you this evening is some ideas about how to navigate that may be helpful, okay? Because it's very easy for us to say, oh, everybody should be loving. Okay, fine, that's great. That's like it's like a nice maxim that goes on a template that, you know, goes across social media because it's very short and sweet. And that's great. But what if people aren't? And we're going to talk about that and some ideas about that. You know, one of the essays in this collection of 67 essays is "Love is Not a Feeling." That's the title of my essay here. And I'll just read a few sentences from it just to kind of set the stage for us. Most people think love is simply an emotion, an amorphous feeling inside. That's what most people are taught. Most people teach that love is feeling good, or, quote, expressing good feelings about others, a feeling that comes and goes, something very indistinct that is hard to nail down, but you know it when you feel it. You know, it could also be defined as the emotion caused by the attraction to something beautiful. And I don't disagree with that or any of these other ideas I just shared, but I want to suggest a different perspective on this popular and important concept. I'm not suggesting, just to be crystal clear, that what I just referred to was in any way incorrect, but I think it's limited. I think those definitions or those ways of thinking about love are limited and at best incomplete. The way I define the concept of love, and we'll weave this definition throughout our discussion this evening together, I choose to define love in the way one of my early teachers taught us to love. Jesus said, love is accepting the other person for who they are, not who you wish they were. So accepting the other person, or you could think about it as we talked earlier in terms of oneself, accepting oneself or accepting others outside of yourself is who they are, not who you wish they would be. That's what unconditional means. You know, and I have another essay in here about unconditional love, so I'll just reference that. You know, people use that phrase, oh, unconditional love from this group or that person or whatever and so forth. To me, that's like saying love, love. There's no such thing as conditional love. Love is love. Love is without condition. If you take Jesus's definition, love is accepting the other person for who they are, not who you wish they were. Conditional is liking. That's the way I think of it, as, okay, I like you when you take the trash out, and I don't like you when you didn't listen to me, you didn't take the trash out. Whatever, you know, those are conditions we place on our relationships and our emotional flow to and from that other person. That's not love. That's not love in the way Jesus and the way I think of love. Love is already unconditional. So saying, people use that phrase, unconditional love, and I get it, and I don't want to pour water on that either. You know, I get it. People are just kind of emphasizing the loveness of the love or something by saying it's unconditional. But I think it's important to use language correctly and not use it sloppily, because if we use language is meant to communicate ideas, and we're communicating ideas not just with the external world all the time, we're communicating ideas with ourselves. And that's the person most people neglect, is themselves. They forget that the first person they're communicating with every time they write something or say something is themselves. So saying this idea of unconditional love all the time is implicitly teaching yourself that there is something like conditional love. Otherwise, why would you call it unconditional love if there's not conditional love? And I would argue and say that that's another point where you can start to create what I call cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance means, those of you who don't know that phrase, it means thinking inconsistently. And our language needs to align with our thinking and therefore our belief systems. Otherwise, by the time it gets out to our behavior, it's all out of whack. And so I prefer to just be very clear with myself. This is Kelvin talking to himself right now, about this whole idea of love being love. It's not a conditional or unconditional concept. Liking, yeah. Sometimes I like people, sometimes I don't like people. And that would be the accurate use of language. Otherwise, why do we communicate? Why do we use language if we're going to use it incorrectly or in a sloppy way? You know, and that goes for this side and the other side. Since we're, with this group, we can talk about that. You know, if I was at the public library talking about this with the general public, I wouldn't say this, but beings on the other side are equally sloppy with their language, quite frankly. They are minds just like they are here. And because they don't have a physical biological body, doesn't mean that their thinking is without cognitive dissonance. So you always have to filter. So whether it's the dry cleaner on this side or whether it's the dead dry cleaner on the other side, who's now a light being, who didn't tell you that his previous incarnation, he was your dry cleaner who was giving you the same advice when he was in his body, and now he's a light being giving you advice on the others from the other side. So filter. Everybody, everybody, I think deserves that. We all deserve that, to your point about self-love. So again, I think by thinking more clearly, first of all, in Jesus' way, love is, accepting the other person for who they are, not who you wish they were. That's the beginning of starting to avoid pitfalls in creating unnecessary suffering for ourselves. For example, people might hear that phrase that I just said, or that definition, loving the other person for who you are, who they are, not who you wish they were, and they still may not fully understand it. Let me break it down for you. So that does not mean you love everybody, you treat everybody equally. This is a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding of how Jesus was teaching, and he's a very loving being. And so it could easily be misinterpreted by people when you observed him, because he embraced and he took people for who they were. And so you would think if you were just observing him, you could incorrectly conclude that he was treating that person who was not a very nice person as equally as this other person who expressed themselves as a very giving, loving, kind person. On one hand, yes, he's treating them the same by accepting them for who they are, but he's not blind to the fact that the person who may have been hurtful was hurtful. So blindness, this whole love is blind, and that's a romantic term that people use. This is not a way to describe Jesus' teachings about love. Love is blind is a romantic thing because sometimes people get so involved in being the romantic type of love, the flutters and the butterflies and all that they can't see clearly. That's what that term means. It's not a teaching term. It's a description term of a state of, romantic love that, somebody may have at any age. I was going to say teenagers, but it could happen to 70, 80, 90-year-olds. It doesn't matter.
Infatuation.
Yes, infatuation. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Infatuation. So that's very real, but it's not how we're using love in the context of our discussion tonight. So what Jesus would say, for example, with the person who was hurtful, who you or I, as observers, may have seen him 2,000 years ago embracing. Why is he doing that? He is doing that, first of all, he sees them for who they are, not who he wishes they would be. They are a hurtful person, but why is he embracing them and so forth and showering them what you and I might perceive as love. He's still giving to them. The reason is because Jesus knows the source of that person's pain. What is the source of that? Why are they a hurtful person? They are a hurtful person because they are in pain inside. And because they're so in pain inside, for whatever reason, we don't have to do any psychoanalysis or, any therapy here, but whatever the source of their pain inside is being expressed outside in their behavior, and they become hurtful to other people. And what did Jesus know about that? What did he just intuit and knew about that I now express as it's the idea of cruelty. And it's the idea that a cruel person, externally, their behavior is cruel. Cruel means what? They enjoy inflicting harm hurt on other people, whether it's emotional, physical, or otherwise. They get enjoyment out of that. That's a cruel person. Okay, I think we would all agree that that's a fundamental definition of cruel person. But why are they cruel? He intuitively saw that they were in such great pain. Why? Because he loved them in the way that I just told you. He could see them for who they were, not who he or anybody wished I wish they would be a more kind person. No. He saw them for who they were. And what did he do about it was try to embrace them, shore them up by doing what? What does that do? That brings up their self-image, their self-confidence, which is why they're a cruel person in the first place. Their cruelty is an expression of their insecurity. And those of you who have ever been bullied before, hello, I have been at one of my jobs, no names, no time frame. I won't, because people will figure out who it was. But, a couple of people at one of my jobs, as an adult. And that kind of behavior arises from what? Insecurity in them. But I knew that. So I didn't take it personally. Was it a pain in the neck? Was it painful to deal with? Absolutely. But I understood where they were coming from, in the sense of they're coming from a place of weakness. The bully always comes from a place of weakness. That's why the bully bullies, okay? Insecurity, need to foist that, push that on other people, make people around them feel worse. It lowers them, the bully feels better. That's the simple formula. Jesus knew that. So what did he do? That's where he turned the tables on them, basically, right? He kind of turned the tables because he's a smart guy. This is part of the Jesus, I think, story, and that is very often overlooked. How sharp he was. People, yes, very loving, but how sharp his mind was. And this notion that sometimes you'll hear this phrase, turn the other cheek, he never said that in that way that many people use. This is a complete misunderstanding, a misinterpretation. People think, I'm sure many of you may have this thought, or maybe you've run into this. You've heard people say, they hit you. I mean, you should just turn the other cheek and let them hit the other cheek. No, that's not Jesus's message. He's not saying don't protect yourself. He would say defend yourself, protect your family. No, he's saying that this is a classic misinterpretation of when people see him embracing this cruel person, they think, oh, turn the other cheek. No, he's embracing them to bring them up. Now, what he would also say is that he's not suggesting that everybody do that, because the bully can sometimes overpower you. He didn't have that problem having bullies overpower him, okay? He's a unique being in that respect. So I would not recommend that you follow literally what Jesus did and go embracing the bully. Instead, my recommendation is you're loving the bully in the way that he described that. Love, right? Seeing the bully for who they are, not who you wish they were, and then you decide how bad the relationship is. And we can talk about nuances of this, but one extreme is the far extreme is you walk away. If it's bad, if you cannot move forward with that relationship and they won't change, then you need to leave. And he would agree with that. Okay? That's being loving. And that's how you love a bully without changing them. Because here's the other nuance of this whole idea of love. Love goes along with free will. And you may think, free will? Personal choice is what free will means. Personal choice and love, how does that go together? It goes together hand in glove, because Jesus saw and taught us right from the get-go that each individual is an individual with free will, personal choice. We cannot make other people do what we want them to do. As much as we would love people to be loving, talk about love, loving and peaceful and peace-loving, we cannot make them be peaceful and loving. They have to make that choice. And so by respecting the other person's free will choice to do whatever they want, that is, you see how that fits into his definition of love. Accepting the other person for who they are, not who you wish they were and try to make them into something else. No, that by accepting them and letting them be themselves, but then back to Kathy's point, we talk about self-love. That's when self-love is critical, and that's when we have to look inside ourselves. Can we live with that person in the relationship the way it is or not? And sometimes we might be, because maybe it was just an infraction that was very temporary and minor, and that's okay. And we can move forward and continue the relationship. Look, how many times, the example I sometimes give in my lectures is, how many times has Kelvin Chin been called Kevin Chin? All right, like I grew up in Boston. I was born in Boston. Anybody know, those people who know Boston? Very Irish town, right? City. And, but how many times have my teachers, my basketball coach, they call me Kevin, at first. And sometimes they just continue calling me Kevin. Is that something that I'm going to end a relationship? No, it's a minor infraction, you see. And can I forgive them and move on from, when I say forgive, can I move on from it? That's how I define forgiving. So I'm not giving them a hall pass. They still screwed my name up, okay? And I'm not going to forget that. There's no forgetting and forgiving here. It's only moving forward. I can move forward. But if somebody's really abusive and hurtful emotionally and or physically, and I've had clients in that situation, I'll tell them to move on. They get to make that, but that's their decision. They got to make that decision. But that's that self-love issue, right? How much do we really love ourselves? Can we honor that within ourselves in order to move on, even if the relationship might have some, oh, but we live in such a nice house, or, oh, he takes me to such nice restaurants, or whatever, or she's such a great cook, but she's abusive me. It could be male or female. I don't want to be gender specific here, because I've been abused by bullied at work by women. So it's like, you just don't know. But you got to decide, at what point is your sense of self-worth, does that supersede you being in that relationship? Yeah. Did you want to say something, Kath?
Well, I guess I'm curious about the suffering part of all of this.
Yes.
Because suffering is voluntary. I mean,
it can be self-inflicted. Is that what you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
I think a lot of Buddhist teaching talks about suffering, and it's your perspective on what is in your environment and how you interpret it, and then you cause yourself to replay the scene enough so it creates suffering.
So there's a couple of new angles in what you're talking, levels, kind of degrees of what you're talking, or perspectives of what you're talking about. I guess perspective is, I was trying to figure out the right word. Different perspectives on what you're talking about. So there's this self-inflicted suffering because of perspective or your interpretation of an experience and how you respond to it. Right. But there's also how we act and how we behave. So there's the internal, what you're talking about, but there's also the external behavior that we have. And so what I'm talking about right now is the external behavior. So do we choose to move on or not? That's a very personal choice, and I can't make that for each individual. We each have to make it for ourselves, right? But what I do is help people clarify where, like in the forgiveness, is an essay in here on forgiveness, the nuances of forgiveness, I call it here in the essay. And so, for example, to weave in this idea of love that we're talking about in this idea of suffering and how to avoid suffering, the phrase that I use in this essay is forgiveness as I accept what you did as an expression of who you were at that moment, and I'm either okay with it, I'm not okay with it, I'm really not okay with it, or it's a deal breaker. Those are the four degrees. I call them the degrees of forgiveness. And so, but you see, the key word is here, and it just ties in this idea of love, the way we're defining it, the way Jesus talked about it, is I accept what you did as an expression of who you were at that moment or moments. I'm accepting that. That's who you were. I'm not trying to change you. That was your free will decision to act in the way that you did. I don't have control over that. I'm acknowledging that, okay? And then you have to decide, or depending on what degree, how bad it is and how it affects you and so forth and so on, what your action is going to be. So that's a little bit different. This is action oriented. You're right. However, in some situations, we can cause ourselves suffering by looking at something that's really not that bad, and we can make ourselves suffer from it because we lose perspective. That's a different type of suffering. And that falls into what I often say in my lectures and some of my essays here. I call it's the as compared to what issue. All right, we always have to have an as compared to what. Otherwise, we don't have a perspective. That's what perspective means. And the more life experience you have, the more you've paid attention to life and paying attention to people and how they behave, and what kind of of energy. You want to get very abstract, you can talk about feeling people's energy, and then their energy leading to the certain thinking and their belief systems and their behavior. Externally, it manifests. All of that, paying attention to all of that can lead to less suffering. Right. Yeah, right? Because then we have a better perspective. It's the as compared to what. And we kind of, and that's, to me, very important in life. I'm a big proponent and teacher of learning from observation of behavior, not judging other people's internal intents. Sometimes you can guess about that, and sometimes you're wrong about what their intent is. So that's really shaky ground. But observing their behavior and judging their behavior, absolutely. I'm a big proponent of that. We judge people based on their external behavior, and that's, again, dovetails into the forgiveness idea. And then we decide where they fit and how intense it is and what the degree is and so forth, and we act accordingly. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, because if we don't apply these kind of filters, we'll call them, in which to look through and assess people and their behavior and their actions and so forth, we open ourselves up to tremendous suffering. And that's what Jesus was trying to avoid. He didn't have many years to be teaching. And so I'm trying to bring out some of the nuances that he shared with many of us. There was a core group of 50 to 100 who spent a lot of time with him. You hear about the 12 and all this stuff, and it's just it was true, but it was also a nice exaggeration, I would say, that's been passed down. But there was really a really good core group of anywhere from 30, 40, 50 to 75 people who spent a lot of time with Jesus, and many of them are here on planet Earth now. And so they can help share some of the nuances of this idea of love. This idea of self-interest, for example, is another idea of his that I talk about here in one of my essays about self-interest. Now, he didn't call it self-interest, but he talked about this concept, and I've pulled this concept out of his teachings and so forth and talk about it in my own 21st century language. That's why I call this 21st century meditations on living life. So it's the linguistics, the languaging, we would call it self-interest. And self-interest is not the same as being selfish. that's also under this umbrella of love and loving oneself and self-love and everything. That's a very, very misinterpreted, especially in spiritual circles. People say, oh, I don't want to be, self-interested. Oh, no. And people start running away. They say, oh, I don't want to be selfish. That's a really big mistake, because that leads to suffering. That's another source of suffering, is a misunderstanding about self-interest. We are all self-interested, but there is a spectrum of self-interest. So yeah, you can be so self-interested that you can be selfish. That's not good. But being self-interested per se is neutral. It's neutral on the spectrum. It's not good or bad. It's just the way it is. We're all looking out for ourselves, as we should. And if we're not looking out for ourselves, so this is where suffering can enter the equation. If we think being self-interested is bad somehow because we went to some spiritual workshop and they were banging that in the head about not being selfish and self-interest, and they were using those two words to interchangeably. See, this is where that cognitive dissonance and the languaging is very important. Then you start thinking, oh, I'm not important. And then you start not loving yourself because you think it's being selfish. No, loving yourself is being self-interested. It's neutral. Everybody needs to love themselves. I would argue more. They would need to love ourselves more. We need to be okay with being self-interested. But if you're too self-interested, then you're being selfish. And if you're too selfish, you become self-absorbed. And then you're narcissistic. But this is a spectrum. It's not black and white. It's not on or off. You're not selfish, or it's not either or. There's a spectrum there, okay? And everybody knows that that's the way you experience life. I'm not saying anything that's new to people. I'm just giving people a filter through which to look at their own lives, and they'll go, well, geez, that makes sense, because that's how your life is. Right. Your life is a spectrum. It's organic, right? It's not on off. Our life is not binary, but it's easy to write a maxim and stick it on social media that's binary,
Yes.
You got to be careful of those.
And that's been actually the paradigm that has caused us to be where we are right now. So many of these statements caused not epidemic, but a wave of adherence to things that really do not serve people. Just like women should take care of everyone else and themselves last. Or, I'll stop there.
No. It's a great point. It's a terrible point that has been, acculturated over the millennia about women, and it's incredibly hurtful to humankind, not just women. I mean, the women definitely, obviously, they're the focus of that hurt, but it's terrible for the men. The men don't realize it. They just don't have the perspective. Those men who have promoted this kind of thinking, and so many women. I have, as you know, I have many women clients who have been hurt in that way, and getting and encouraging the women to use an example, to use a visual example, to fly out of the cage when the cage door is open.
Yes. I
mean, that's not that. There are many women who are in situations, whether it's in work or personal relationships or family relationships or whatever, where they could fly free and they choose not to because the culturation is so deep and it's so long, Kathy. It's not just this lifetime for that woman. Let's just a hypothetical woman A.
Yeah.
Woman A. It's not just one lifetime. It's hundreds of lifetimes for that woman, probably. I'm just conjecturing, but many thousands of years of that acculturation. And it becomes comfortable because it's familiar, even if it's unhealthy.
Yes.
That's the tragedy. Yeah.
So I want to make sure that people understand we're talking about that the the concept of love is different, well, it can be simplified and used in a much more efficient way than what we're doing right now. Basically, our language is not supporting.
It's too general. It's too general to say the world needs love. It's okay. It's like it makes a great song chorus and all that. Okay, great. But it's not practical. That's the thing. I hope that's what people are drawing from what I'm getting at in this talk with you, this discussion is how can we make this concept practical on a daily life basis? Because it's the nuances, it's the gray areas. That's where life is lived. When everything's kumbaya and everything's, that's not when you really meet who the real person is. Right. It's when things are tough. That's when you get to meet who is that person really in a tough situation. Are they really a kind person or are they not? When the chips are down on them, what do? Are they still giving or are they a taker? That's those kind of nuances. That's where we're trying to poke at here. Yeah.
Well, and I want to make sure everyone knows that you deal with people that are under that kind of stress. You support so many people that might end up reverting to their primal expression because they're in so much pain. I mean, they've either had a near-death experience and they can't figure out how to integrate it all, or they have huge, when I took the meditation class with you, people had huge anxiety issues that they could barely function.
Exactly.
So you're helping those people, and then you're also helping people that have lost a child or have some big loss. So these are people that are getting back to maybe a core part that they don't really like about themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And how can we really give and love when we feel so empty and depleted ourselves, whether it's from an emotional strain or anxiety or whatever? And so we all need tools, and that's, as you know, that's what I teach, is tools for people to help them fill up their reservoir inside, because that's when we can start giving and loving. It's easy to say we all should be loving, but can we actually put that into daily practice in a way that doesn't require thinking? Because to me, that's what we need to love. We need to live a life of being a loving person, not live a life thinking about being a loving person. Thinking about being a loving person is just thinking. It's just a thought. It's a nice thought. It's not a bad thought, but it's a thought. It's not, you're not being a loving person if you're just thinking about it. It's like a plan. Oh, well, I'm planning on it, but I'm not there yet.
Well, what I want to compliment you about is that by doing your classes, you have exposed us to a bigger version of ourselves.
Yes.
So when we start to think about anything, we're not thinking, I don't know what's going on outside. We're not thinking about ourselves as the little me.
Yes.
Because once you've had that experience of meditating twice a day and experiencing yourself as the bigger version of yourself, then everything is seen from that perspective. Every decision, every interaction is there's not the you don't have to make everyone wrong so you're right. You don't even have to care.
There's more room for acceptance, which is
exactly
Jesus, which is the definition of love. Accepting, not limiting, not making them into what my ideal image of them should be. No, yes. I can have an ideal image. That's okay. We all have ideal images of what a great job is, what a great romantic partners, what a great child is, and so forth, whatever. we all have ideal images, but we have to be careful not to be foisting that and pushing that on other people to have to meet that all the time, because that takes away their own free will to be who they are. And that's not love. Okay. Loving is accepting. And so, to use your example, so you've heard me say this in the meditation class, it's like people mostly, they're limited to what the psychology professor called the 8-inch plastic bucket part of the mind.
Right.
And then it's like little with 10 or 15 ping pong balls. That's our thoughts and emotions bouncing in and out of that mind, which is fine. But that's a very small, limited part of our mind. The rest of the Houston, what he called the Houston Astrodome, because he was teaching at the University of Houston in Texas, he said, look at the Houston Astrodome, this huge baseball, football stadium, sports stadium. It's huge. It seats 90,000 people. That's your mind. So what I teach people to do is how to expand their capacity into that part of their mind. And then to this idea of, limited, or, I think of that as more limited and more expansive. But to me, after you've been meditating a while, that is all your mind. There's no such thing as a higher mind or higher self or this or that. When your mind is limited to an 8-inch plastic bucket and you're thinking that all the time, that's you, then yeah, you're thinking about your higher mind or your higher self and so forth. But once you've expanded your conscious capacity so many times outside that 8-inch bucket limitation, and your mind is now, as you said, your conscious capacity is so much bigger, you realize that your mind is vast. It's huge.
Right.
There is no higher self. That is just me. It's not black and white. It's fluid.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
I think it creates a much more accepting personality. It creates a much more curious.
Yes,
mind.
curious.
So
Great.
when someone might react, you actually are curious about it rather than responding in a survival mode.
Exactly.
What triggered that? What was that? And if you really go to the next level, if you feel that everything in this hologram is for you, you're wondering why you were supposed to even see that or experience that, right?
Well, all of those things. Tolerance, patience increases when we feel less limited. And the other word that comes to mind is safety. When we are feeling very, very limited, we do not feel safe.
That's
When
right.
when our awareness is much more expanded, or our physical body has had a really good night's sleep, just for people who can relate to that, then you feel more patient. You're more loving.
Yeah.
Which is what we're talking about here. And you're less prone to making bad choices. Bad choices lead to suffering.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Here we go.
So I want to make sure I have a fan here.
Yes, we have another attendee, which is great. A furry one.
Is there any questions that anyone from the audience would like to share with Kelvin, so that we can get a discussion going a little bit?
Let's see. Ted in the audience asks, what about the teaching of deny oneself? So there's you're talking about Jesus, Ted? Is that what you're referring to? I think probably.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can come on video if you want.
Well, I don't know what I want. Let's see.
There you go. You're good.
Good.
Yeah. In Christianity, there's this teaching. As Jesus said, that one must, in order to follow him, you have to deny yourself. Self-denial. There is a large teaching, actually, honestly, in those circles about denying yourself. And so I just wanted to get your feedback on that.
Yeah. No, he didn't say or mean deny oneself in the way that people interpret that phrase. That's something that people have added to. Many of the teachings have been added to the Bible, as you know, Ted.
Yeah.
In your study of the Bible, you and I have talked privately about this, so you know that many things have been added, and the official Bible wasn't agreed upon by the 300 plus bishops in Nicaea until they voted in around 360 AD. So this was almost 400 years after Jesus died.
Right.
The Bible was, pulled together. That's the New Testament, and of course the Old Testament, et cetera, the whole thing. So yeah, a lot of things were added. That's something.
So that,
Not by
really,
Jesus is teaching,
that,
deny
that,
oneself.
well, that-
In fact, his message was seek the kingdom of heaven within, which what he meant by that was close your eyes. He didn't say close your eyes and meditate, but we did this. We close our eyes and we meditated. No, we didn't call it meditation. He says seek the kingdom of heaven within. But that's why when I teach meditation to Kathy and others like you and Ted and so forth and others, that you have that more expansive experience, because that's the kingdom of heaven within each of us.
right. I'm just saying it's really, I mean, I'm a lot different person today. However, but from what I see from that is that there's so many people being taught to not like them. So it's almost like, don't love yourself. That's really saying, don't love yourself. And if I don't have self-love, I'm in the world of trouble, and
Yeah.
but to me, it's more like saying, and it's really being propagated a whole lot, and it's mixed up with being humble. That's really another
Yes. And there's an essay on page 241 here in the book, Ted, Love and Self-Interest. And I talk about this idea that you're talking about. And where does it come from? I think it comes from, whoever put these ideas out there, whether it's from this side or the other side, because there's a lot of stuff was flowing back and forth in the creation of the Bible back in the early 300s. Where this happened, I think, was out of control. I think that to control people, then let's make them feel demeaned.
Right.
Not as big, not as whole, not as complete.
Right.
And we, whoever the we is, pick, whatever you want to fill in the blank, the we will make you feel complete. And so then you have to go through me, whether it's a priest, high priest, whether it's in Egypt. I'm not picking on Christianity here. It could be the high priest in Egypt, in ancient Egypt. It could be Sumeria, 6,000 years ago. It could be it could be post Jesus Christianity. It could be anyway. Zoroastrianism, one of the most ancient known recorded religions. All of them have aspects of what you're talking about, and I think that's infused in there by the people who want to control, whoever they were. Yeah.
Yes, that's what a lot of the near-death experiencers talk about, the mystical experience. And once you've had that, you don't need an intermediary to go to the light and go to that energy. So that's how I met Kelvin, was through that group. So
yeah.
So Kelvin, I'm sorry we're out of time.
Great.
We'll have to do this again as we do.
Yeah, I hope it's been helpful.
Anytime I can.
I hope it's been helpful for people, because again, my goal is to help people, regardless of what their belief is, their cultural background and so forth. I have clients now I'm up to 58 countries now. I just got a client in Iran. So he's my 58th country, Iran. And so I'm here to help people. It doesn't matter culture, religious background, no religious background, atheist, agnostic, it doesn't matter. Belief in an afterlife, doesn't believe in an afterlife, doesn't matter. I'm here to help people live life more fully, because this is where we are here.
That's perfect. Well, thank you. Everything you do is top notch and elegant. I really appreciate your style. You're a great model for a lot of people, for communicating clearly and creating a simpler world. This is really what we're talking about, is focusing on the good stuff and not putting much attention on the bad stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff to enjoy in the world. There is a lot.
So Kelvin, I want to make sure I put kelvinchin.org in the chat but is that the best way to reach you?
Yeah,
So-
kelvinchin.org is my main nonprofit website, and I have several others. And probably the easiest thing, if they can't even remember that, they just remember my name, put the L in Kelvin and remember my name, and then Google my name, and all the websites will come up. But on the bottom of any page on any of my 4 websites are hot links to the other 3. So that's the easy way also. And then you should check out my YouTube channel and so forth.
Yes, yes.
100 YouTube videos there.
And he's so generous. I think you'll find you'll be as big a fan as I am after you experience him.
Oh
Yes?
yeah, and free phone session or Zoom session with anybody in the world about any topic that any of the work that I do. Free phone session as part of my nonprofit work. Yeah.
You're amazing. You're amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I can't compliment you enough. You've really helped me in so many ways. I so appreciate you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.